It was almost real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast, episode 56. Hello, and welcome to this episode of It Was Almost Real, the Pro Wrestling History Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to professional wrestling history from 1870 to 1920, when contests were supposed to be legitimate, and every once in a while were. And joining me in studio this week, back from trials, tribulations, and many other sundry things, is Dangerous Dan. And we're joined by my youngest son, Trey.
Hello.
My oldest son, Trey. I'll figure out who you are.
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, almost everybody gets thrown for a loop when they find out I'm 2 years older than Caleb at work.
Yeah.
Caleb says Jack has a flashback every single time. Like, oh dang, I forget he's older than you.
Yeah, you got such a baby face. I think that's why everybody thinks you're younger.
Yeah.
So Dan, what would you like to say before we get started on our update and all the other august things we've got planned for this week?
I'm getting along pretty good now. I'm getting better. Got a release date scheduled for July out of rehab and rehabilitation, so that's always a good thing. And I want to know what WWF is thinking, letting Liv Morgan win the ladies title. She's no bigger than a minute, and anybody that beats her is going to be a credible win. And Becky just got the title not too long ago,
right?
And to already take it off of a credible, competitor like that is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So,
and they led the pay-per-view with that, or the premium live event. They led that with that match. So I was going to actually go over that in the review. Did you get a chance to see any of it, or have you just been reading about it?
I've just been reading about it and seeing clips on the internet.
Gotcha. Yeah. I figured we talk about it. There were some good things on there. This is the first premium live event that I would say Triple H didn't hit it out of the park. There were some good things, and there were some things that kind of made you scratch your head and go, I don't understand this at all.
Well, and another thing I want to know is, are they going to start doing all the premium live events across the ocean?
I don't think so. I think it was just a timing issue with the last two. But I do think they're going to do more, which they're a worldwide company. They should be doing more throughout the world. And I'll tell you what, the last two crowds, it argues for them doing more events overseas, because both the crowd in France and the crowd in Saudi Arabia were outstanding.
Yeah, well, I know their next one's going to be in Scotland.
Yeah, and which makes sense. You'd want Drew to headline that if he's healthy.
Yeah, I was going to say, you bring in Drew McIntyre, Becky, Bailey, that they're all. Well, wait a minute.
No, Becky's Irish, and so is Sheamus. Bailey's American, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I thought Bailey was.
Let me tell you, when she comes out there with the world title in Scotland, I don't care if she's from Peoria, Illinois. That place, the roof's going to blow off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So Trey has no idea what we're talking about. He's already fallen asleep over there. But there was a premium live event yesterday, Trey, in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, the King and Queen of the Ring. And we'll talk about that in the review. But I was talking to your uncle. We get feedback from listeners who enjoy your and Caleb's take on wrestling, because you're not traditional wrestling, you're not wrestling fans at all. So it's all kind of new to you guys. And originally, your uncle and I had talked about you guys watching 2 or 3 matches from WrestleMania that we would review this year. Well, WrestleMania is already a couple months old now, so doesn't make a whole lot of sense to review something 4 months after the fact, although I guess we review stuff 40 years after the fact, too.
Yeah.
But what I was thinking is SummerSlam will be the beginning of August, somewhere in there, is that we have your uncle and your brother and you, and we watch SummerSlam together here one Sunday night. I'll make dinner and everything. And then we could review that on the next podcast episode, and you guys could give your thoughts on the individual matches and what you think. And you've seen a little bit of their recent shows here and there as part of the reviews, so you can kind of give your take on the direction you think under Triple H, Paul Levesque. You know, Uncle Dan and I have our own views as wrestling fans from a long time ago. I kind of tapped out on it for quite a while.
Yeah, both of us did.
Yeah. I think Katie Vick was 2002, whatever that skit was. I kind of had my fill of it. And then MMA, the Ultimate Fighter, was 2005. And I fell back in love with MMA, and that's really what my focus was on. So, and I probably wouldn't watch as much of the modern stuff if it wasn't for the podcast we do, because I had told the listeners in one of the solo episodes that I'm almost to the point where I'm ready to tap out on modern wrestling again, because I'm sick of the furniture fights, the garbage wrestling, and I'm sick of the three-way matches, and we've got another one. I actually watched this one because I was interested in the wrestlers that were involved, but most of the time now, if it's three guys, three girls in the ring, I just skip it.
Yeah.
So, but that was my plan for kind of getting you and Caleb, getting your views on some of the wrestling. And then the other thing I wanted to talk to both of you about is I made an executive decision over the last couple weeks, and it's just because I'm so busy right now. I took vacation Thursday and Friday this week, and I worked a couple hours Thursday and about half a day Friday just to keep up right now, because from the beginning of May till the middle of September is the really busy time for me at work.
Right.
I want to go back to the schedule we were using last year, which will be podcast on the second Monday, the fourth Monday, and if we have a fifth Monday like we do in July, we will go have a third episode that month, but go back to that schedule for the summer and then reevaluate at the end of September. We may go back to what we've been doing, which is a podcast most weeks after the summer.
So we're not going to try and do 3 a month then?
We'll do 3 a month when we have a fifth Monday, but we'll do 2 a month till June, July, and August. We'll reevaluate in September, because by the second week in September, my workload will lighten up again.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons I'm trying to get the Pesic book out before the middle of July, because from the middle of July till the end of August is particularly insane for me.
Yeah.
And it's it's that way normally, but with all three fellowships recruiting and all that going on this year, it's a lot busier than normal.
Oh gosh, I bet.
So, and I'm not it's my purpose. It's what I like to do. I'm not complaining about it. I just have to be realistic about what I can accomplish during those months.
Right, exactly.
Oh, I think I told Caleb. I don't think I told Trey. And I don't know that I told you. Researching this John Pesic book, I had believed some of the things I had read about the match between Pesic and Pendleton, which I have found out now were not true. It was a legitimate contest, and but it didn't settle a promotional war. It really probably started all the tension between Jack Curley and the Goldust Trio, because they didn't con Curley in that, but they definitely took advantage of his arrogance setting that match up in that. So in the new book, I straighten out the common things that, Curly was trying to challenge Lewis with Pendleton, and Pendleton being the Olympic champion. They were worried about that. Curly actually was not trying to set up a match with Pendleton and Lewis. He was trying to set up a match with Lewis and Vladek Zbyszko, and Lewis hated Vladek Zbyszko and didn't want to give him a wrestling match when he got to be world champion, not because he didn't think he could beat him. He beat him many times. There's no way Vladek Zbyszko was going to beat Ed Strangler Lewis in a contest, but he didn't want him to get the big payday that comes with wrestling the world champion in New York because he didn't like him personally. So that is the reason that they set that match up, which I'll straighten out in the new book. But from now on, whenever I say something that I've read and I have not personally researched, I'm going to have to put a disclaimer out there. According to the sources that I've read, I have not researched this deeply yet.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that with this week's episode because it's kind of the same thing when I'm talking about the working in Brazil. This week's episode is actually about the history topic, is about working outside of the United States. And I became aware of this reading the books Choque, Choque, by Roberto Pedrea. And these books are available on Amazon. I'll have links for them in the show notes at kenzermanjr.com/episode 56. You would think because the books are about the development of BJJ in Brazil, that choke is some version of talking about a choke, but actually the word means shocking in Portuguese. I think it's safe to say Pedrea is not a fan of Carlos and Helio Gracie because he tries to debunk a lot of the myths around the development of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Whenever you hear the origin stories of most martial arts, it's a nice mixture of fact and fiction. Would you not say that that's the truth, Trey?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the best example of that is the Eskrima master who had to dive off a cliff into shark-infested water, swim into a cave to learn these ancient secrets of fighting with sticks.
Yeah. It's good stories, but it's a lot of fiction mixed in with the facts. And the Gracies, because a lot of the
stories... I saw that movie one time.
Do what, Dan?
I think I saw that movie where the guy jumped off the cliff into the shark-infested waters.
Well, believe it or not, in the Gracie story, Helio supposedly jumped into shark-infested waters, swam with some sharks.
Well, you know what? Good for him. I tell you what, I'd rather fight with something besides sticks.
Yeah, particularly if a shark's coming at me.
Exactly.
Oh, that wasn't Helio Gracie. That was one of the Eskrima guys in the Philippines.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but Helio Gracie, there's a story in there about Helio jumping in shark-infested waters and swimming to save a sailor. Now, who knows? He might have jumped in the waters and saved the sailor. But it's interesting because whenever you hear the stories about these guys, it's like they're supermen.
Yeah.
Well, they can do some amazing things, but, sometimes it's like listening to Hulk Hogan. He did amazing things in the wrestling business. Why he has to put himself in every story in the world as the guy, that's involved in it.
I was going to say, Hulk Hogan said that he did a lot of amazing stuff, but how much of it can you believe?
Well, the stuff that we know is pretty well documented in the 90s. We can believe.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we can believe anything else.
When he was supposed to be the original bass player for Metallica. I'm going to call. Sorry, bull crap on that one.
Yeah, he had lots of interesting stories about all the things he was supposed to do.
And he was a major league pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds, but wrestling paid more.
Who?
Hogan.
Okay, so he stole Randy Savage's. So Randy Savage was a catcher for the Cincinnati Reds minor league team. Now you know why I called the guy bogus in the 80s. So
you stopped in the 80s?
Well, no, but I didn't yell it at him anymore from 5 feet away. Your uncle and I had seats that were right next to the aisleway in Kiel. And all the wrestlers were coming down the aisleway. Well, we're standing right there. Yep. And I'm like, bogus, you suck. And all of a sudden, your uncle's tugging at my back and everything. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, would you sit down? And I look around. The Hulk Hogan fans were not amused that I was calling their hero bogus.
Oh, God, we're going to have a rumble at Kiel.
Yeah, and I was 17 and your uncle was 14.
Mm-hmm. But we'll go getting back to our topic here. Is the fact that they brought wrestling to Brazil, and although it didn't take off.
Oh, they didn't bring wrestling. There was pro wrestling in Brazil.
Okay, so did that make wrestling become more of a legitimate sport than just a county fair sport?
No, and that's what I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
It was they were working in Brazil, and that's how I found out about this. So when the Gracies learned jiu-jitsu, and the person who learned it was Carlos Gracie. He learned jiu-jitsu from Kosi Maeda, Count Combat, who was a Kodokan Judo black belt. I always thought Taro Miyake was also a judo black belt. He actually learned the same style of jiu-jitsu as Dr. Kano. But Miyake and Kosi Maeda and the Brazilian instructors as well all found the same thing, that most of the time they could not make a living from their martial arts instruction. And the Gracie Academy, the Carlos and Elio were able a lot of the time to make a good living from the academy, but they were an exception. And it wasn't that way in the beginning. And so a lot of the judo black belts, the jiu-jitsu black belts, would have challenge matches with pro wrestlers or boxers. In Brazil, they'd have it with the capoeira guys. They would do that to supplement their income because they couldn't make enough income to live just on the martial arts instruction alone. That was not necessarily the case with the Gracies as much, but they did do the challenge matches because they wanted to build the reputation of the academy. So if you heard the history of the Gracie Academy, you hear all about Carlos and you hear all about Elio, but you do not hear about Oswaldo and George and Gastão, who were also Gracie brothers, and were all five of the brothers were involved with the academy. Elio actually was much later to the game because he was sort of a sickly kid. And the first Gracie champion was not Elio. It was George, who was 2 years older than Elio. And George was known as the Red Cat. And a lot of the early challenge matches, it was George Gracie fighting capoeira guys and wrestlers. And the pro wrestlers in Brazil, they were working, but a lot of them were the sailors that would come off the ships from America or England or that who knew how to wrestle a little bit and would go in and have these challenge matches. But just like in the United States and other places, some of the challenge matches were worked. And George Gracie, who had a falling out with Carlos and was not a big fan of the way Carlos and Elio wrote him out of the history of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, has admitted that he took part in worked matches, but that Elio never did. All of Elio's fights were legitimate because Elio did not take part in worked fights, which I believe because George was not a fan of Elio and Carlos, yet he admits that Elio never took part in the fixed fights, but George did, and so did most of the other jiu-jitsu black belts and the wrestlers. So they all worked together in these challenge matches to put on an entertaining fight for the crowd, and they were working just like they worked in the United States. I knew there was working outside of the United States in England and in some other places, but when I started reading this book, I discovered that they also worked matches in Brazil, and they did so not only with just the pro wrestlers, but with the jiu-jitsu fighters in the challenge matches. Judo versus wrestling, jiu-jitsu versus wrestling matches were fairly common, common. They were taking place in both England and the U.S. in the first 2 to 3 decades of the 20th century. Miyake actually becomes a pro wrestler in the United States, and he does almost all work matches after the mid-teens. And Miyake was in his 40s. Go ahead, Dan.
Let me a minute, Ken. Let me ask you, how did that work out? A judo and a jiu-jitsu fighter against an American wrestler fighter. I mean, those are two completely different styles.
Right, and that's a good question. So they did it a couple of different ways. So sometimes, so say you had a boxer versus a jiu-jitsu guy, which happened in France a couple times. Everybody would wear the gi tops, but they would also have to wear the boxing gloves sometimes.
Okay.
Or they'd just go bare-fisted, but they would tape their hands. That's how they would have the match. A lot of times when it was two grapplers, so it was the wrestler versus the jiu-jitsu or judo guy, which was much more common. They would have a mixed styles match. So one fall would be Japanese wrestling. Is what they call the judo and jiu-jitsu a lot of times. And they would wear a gi top, both the wrestler and the judo or jiu-jitsu player, during that first fall, which was usually won by the judo or jiu-jitsu player because the gi top gave them an advantage that the wrestler wasn't used to. Then they would have a catch fall for the second fall, and the wrestler would usually win that. And I'm talking about legitimate challenge matches now. So when Taro Miyake wrestled Ad Santel in San Francisco in 1916, the first fall was Japanese wrestling. It went about 30 minutes, and Miyake won that one when he threw Santel. The next one was a catch bout, and where they took the jackets off, and Santel caught Miyake around the neck, picked him up, and did a slam and knocked him unconscious. Had he not knocked him unconscious, they both won the fall. Santel won the fall quicker, so that third fall would have been according to catch rules. That's how they would decide those matches. It would usually be 2 out of 3 falls, 1 fall in one style, 1 fall in the other style, and whoever won the quickest fall, that style would be the third fall. So most of the time, that's how those matches occurred. In Brazil, I know when, so Vladik Zabisco, actually, him and his brother Stanislaus toured Brazil in 1938, and Elio Gracie actually had a match with Vladik Zabisco. Now, realize, in 1938, Vladik Zabisco was 47. So he's a bit past his prime. Elio Gracie at that time would have been 25, and George Gracie would have been 27. So Vladik Zbyszko wrestled both Gracie brothers in challenge matches. He beat George Gracie, but he didn't lose. He beat George Gracie, but he wrestled Elio a few days later, and Elio took him to like a 1 or 2 hour draw. They did not do the 2 out of 3 fall format for that. Vladik Zbyszko wore his wrestling attire. Elio wore his gi, and that's just how they had that match. But a lot of times, the ones that occurred in England and the United States, that's the format that they would have. One fall, judo, jiu-jitsu, or a lot of times it was called Japanese wrestling rules. The catch wrestling rules, and then the third fall would be determined by who won the quickest fall.
I was just saying, with the, I don't know if the English sailors were attuned to much of the Japanese rules wrestling. And like you said, it was a disadvantage to them because if they had to throw somebody, I mean, how would they know how to throw somebody unless they'd done it before?
Right. The one thing I will say, the English wrestlers a lot of time were better catch wrestlers than the U.S.
And I was going to say, didn't they have to literally ban a lot of the double leg takedowns and leg takedowns in judo to keep wrestlers from coming in and smoking them in the Olympics?
Well, they feared that. That's why they banned it. They banned the double leg, so you can't even touch the leg anymore. Dr. Kano, his favorite throw is, it's the third throw in the Nagano Kata. The
fireman carry one?
Yeah, the fireman's carry one. It's not Kataguruma. It's it's the whole body throw, but that was the whole, or the throw. I'm sure you've heard the story. This could be apocryphal too, but that Dr. Kano had real trouble with one of the students who would just beat him and beat him and beat him. And the guy weighed about 300 pounds. And, Dr. Kano was only like 140 pounds. And then he didn't come up with it. It's been around forever. But he perfected that. Is that the wheel? No, it's not the wheel throw. It'll come to me after we're off the podcast. But that throw that mimics a fireman's carry from wrestling, that's the throw that he used to throw that 300-pound guy. The guy walked right into it, and he used that to throw him. And so now that throw is illegal in competitive judo because they're concerned that wrestlers will come in who have been doing single leg and double leg takedowns their whole life, and they'll dominate the judo. That's a terrible way to handle, being worried about the wrestlers. The judo players have advantages over the wrestlers that they're not used to preparing for either. So I just think that's a terrible way to do things.
Right. My only point is that it wouldn't have been that big of a jump even back like in the old wrestling, whatever. It wouldn't be that big of a disadvantage on the wrestlers because there are still several techniques that were legal that pretty much just translated into the Japanese style wrestling. Like, again, they still had a lot of the takedowns.
Yeah.
So you could just do those and you'd be good.
You remember when we were doing judo, we had several wrestlers in that class, and if you just stick that leg out there, they can't resist going for that leg. And I had developed that choke. It was, I don't know, it was like an upside down kata hajime. Remember where I'd hooked the person around the head? We were tied up. They'd reach for the leg.
Guillotine?
And then no, it wasn't a guillotine because my arm would be up between their arm and their neck. And then when they would come in, I would put my arm over their head like a guillotine, but instead of wrapping it like a guillotine, because my other arm was up around their neck and that, I would grab my elbow and squeeze, and it was sort of like a reverse kata hajime. But man, they all tapped out quick from that. But they couldn't help themselves reaching for that leg. They had been trained to do that for so long, and that's before they started banning the leg takedowns. So, and in class, we would have let them try for it anyway, because those were legitimate throws. But they couldn't help themselves, so I just bait them in and then choke them.
Yeah.
And you could bait them in and do the guillotine. The problem is they're probably going to take you down when you do that.
Yeah.
You know, judo's not MMA. That's a different rule set.
Right.
But I was surprised to see that they had working in Brazil, just like they did here and in England, and I had no idea that any of the people involved with the Gracies had worked fights. I didn't know, but I didn't know that much about George Gracie either, because in the stuff that and most of the information we have now, it's getting a lot better, but most of the information we had on jiu-jitsu initially came from Horion when he came to the U.S. And a lot of the stuff like that was left out. You know, they're not going to want anybody knowing that some of the other brothers took part and worked matches and all of that. So
yeah,
you don't get that. But I didn't know that there was that much of a professional wrestling circuit in Brazil. But, you know, it's a major town outside of or it's a major country. So I don't know why I didn't realize that they would have had that.
Yeah.
Major city. It's a huge country.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, comments?
I can't say it's too shocking. Like, I've heard some stuff about the Gracies lately. Like, apparently Elio was not a great husband from what I hear.
There's
like he was very aggressive with his wife or whatever. Like,
so his first wife, his name was Margarita. Yeah. And she is really the hero of the Gracie family, who should have a statue to herself.
Yeah.
So she could not have children. And so Elio ended up having, so the oldest three boys, Orion, Helson, and Hickson, are the children of, I think it was somebody who worked at the academy. This was Carlos's suggestion that Elio, they wanted kids, they couldn't have kids. And Elio raised several of Carlos's kids besides Holes. So, as as a lot of people may or may not know, Carlos Gracie Sr. had 21 children from 6 different women. He was married 3 times. And his first wife died of some kind of unfortunate disease. And they had several children who Elio and Margarita ended up raising, because when Carlos got married the second time, and this is based on my memory of what I've read about this, I know the second wife did not want to raise Holes, who Carlos has had out of wedlock. I think that may have been the case with the other kids as well. But I know that Margarita and Elio raised a bunch of Carlos's kids from his first marriage. Some of them, like Carlson and Hobson, I think were already grown. But some of the younger kids, I think that they raised, and we know he raised Holes, because Holes always called him Papa and called Carlos, who was his biological father, his blonde Papa. But Elio had those 3 kids with somebody else that was suggested, and Margarita agreed to it, but she raised all of them. Well, Elio started having an affair with one of the secretaries at the academy, who turned out to be Vera, who was his second wife. And that is the mother of Holker. I'm pretty sure it's Holker, Holker, Hoyler, Hoyce, Haben, and then Marika is the youngest. And Elio might have had 2 daughters. Unfortunately, because they don't teach jiu-jitsu, they don't talk about the daughters as much. Elio has all these kids. He's basically got a second family on the side. And Margarita finds out about it, has Elio, she's very hurt when she finds out about it, but she still has Elio bring all the kids to their big house because she does not want the kids to suffer. And so they're all raised together as brothers and sisters. She brings Vera into her house and treats her well and everything. Hickson, that was one of the few things that he didn't like that his dad did. He was always affected by that because he would see his mother crying at night and everything because of this situation. And it seems to have had an effect on Hickson growing up, seeing that with his mom. And realize none of these children are Margarita's biological children, but she raised them all as her own. Well, Margarita is significantly older than Vera. She's Elio's age. And Elio is, 20 plus years older than Vera. When Margarita dies, then Elio marries Vera, who's been living with them all this time and that. And that's Elio's second wife.
Yeah.
You almost never hear about Margarita, but Margarita should be the one to have a statue of herself, because without her, a lot of those children wouldn't have been raised. She raised a lot of kids that were not her own, and she's still talked of very glowingly by the kids.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's not too shocking when you have that type, because
they're all human beings. Everybody.
Right, that's what I mean. Like, it's not super shocking.
So Carlos, he had a friend, and this friend had a wife, and I can't remember if the friend couldn't have children or whatever, but Carlos convinces him to let Carlos father the children. So that's where Carlos Gracie Jr. and all of the kids, a big group of his kids are from that. And when the friend felt like he was being duped by Carlos and they split, it was a huge court case and a scandal in Brazil. Carlos divorced his second wife to marry the third wife, who was the mother of Carlos Jr. I keep saying Carlson Jr. Carlos Jr. and all of that. So, there was definitely some scandals around them. There were some assaults that happened early on when they were trying to spread martial arts that they got arrested for and that. So it isn't the rosy picture, but all martial arts try to do that. They paint this rosy picture of its founder.
Oh, yeah.
Hide the things really that they don't want people to know.
The public stage, is trying to put as many of their skeletons in the closet as they can so they don't get that stuff doesn't follow them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there's a lot more to the story than you'll hear out of the official thing. The only thing I will say, the thing about Choke, and it's 3 volumes. It's Choke volume 1, 2, and 3. But most of what I was talking about today comes from volume 1 and 2. 3 is more modern. Roberto is not a fan of Carlos and Elio. At least if you read his books, you don't come away with that he's a fan of them. But it's very, very thoroughly researched. It's dry because, the first book, I want to say, is 700 or 800 pages. And it's dry reading. But it is methodically, thoroughly researched. You will have as clear a picture of the early days of jiu-jitsu as you possibly can when you read these books, but they are dry. And if you are a huge fan of Elio and Carlos and you don't want to hear anything bad about them, I would not get these books, because you'll hear good things that they did, but you'll also hear a lot of the bad things that they did too.
Right.
So working is not just an American thing. I think we took it to a level that few have taken it to, but it was just not an American thing.
I mean, yeah, because didn't we like use it as like a gambling scheme, like to?
Yes, that's where working came about for a couple of reasons. Early on, it was gambling schemes and protecting yourself from injury. Later, once the promotional system develops in the mid to late teens, Jack Curley was the first big city promoter. He was promoting New York City, but there were promoters before Curley, but they had the smaller towns. Curley was the first big city promoter, him and George Toohey in Boston. And as the promotional system builds out, the promoters wanted to control everything. And that's when wrestling became pretty much 100% work, unless they were agreed upon legitimate contests to settle something, most of the time promotional wars, or they were double crosses, which there were tons of double crosses in the 1920s and 1930s. I used to think that when Stanislaus Zbyszko double-crossed Big Wayne Munn in Philadelphia in April 1925, that the promoters quit putting the title on performers at that point, because they had learned that if you did that and a shooter or a hooker came along, they could beat the guy legitimately and take the title. But that was wrong. Promoters would forget about that. They would put it on a performer, usually a former football player like Big Wayne Munn. Something would happen to embarrass the football player. Then they would put it back on a shooter or a hooker again, and they would keep going through it. So in the mid 1930s, probably the biggest wrestling star not named Jim Londas was Dano O'Mahony, and he was huge in Boston. He was an Irish athlete, but he was a performer. He had been an Olympic performer in, I don't know, curling or rowing or something like that, but he was a great athlete. And Paul Bowser wanted an Irish athlete to push in Boston because it was a huge Irish population. And Dano O'Mahony got over so well in the Northeast. He was the biggest box office draw for a while. Nobody will ever beat Londas, but he was in Londas territory, drawing five-figure audiences. And so they put the belt on him because he was a gold mine. And then Dick Schickett double-crossed him and beat him, made him look like an idiot, and pretty much ruined his wrestling career and took the world title off him legitimately. So it's promotional control and greed and all of that played into the double crosses. But that's why wrestling started being worked after the mid-teens. The promoters wanted to have control, and the promoters were managing the gambling schemes now. In 1911, and this is in Hackenschmidt versus Gotch. That second Hackenschmidt-Gotch wrestling match, George Hackenschmidt was hurt, and he knew he probably wasn't going to be able to hold Gotch off very long, and he wanted to cancel the match. And they had sold so many tickets. I think it was 34,000 fans came out to Comiskey Park in Chicago to see that match. Curley and all the organizers knew that if they canceled a match, they would be ruined, having to pay back all those tickets and everything. So Curley begged Hackenschmidt to go on with the match. And Hackenschmidt agreed, with the caveat that they announced in the newspaper all bets were off, which Curley promptly did. But the day of the match, Curley also promptly sent his gambling crew into the stadium and still got betting going on. Now, he could have been totally lying about this amount. He did legitimately send people in to work the crowd and to get bets going. He told Marcus Griffith, who wrote The Fall Guys, The Barnum of Bounce, in the 1938 after Curley had died, He told him that he had made $30,000 betting on Gotch in that second Gotch Hackenschmidt match. Even though he had called off the betting in the newspapers, he still sent the gambling crews into the stadium. They got betting going, and he claimed to have won $30,000 by doing that. Even if it was $15,000, that's a king's ransom in 1911 for an outcome he knew was going to happen. So he was fleecing everybody that was betting on Hackenschmidt. He was fleecing them because he knew very well that there was no way that Hackenschmidt was going to be able to stand up to Gotch with his knee in as bad a shape as it was.
Yeah, that's what I was figuring it was.
So are we ready for the review?
Yeah, sure.
So Dan, you're probably going to be happy you didn't get to see this one because it started out with that match between Becky Lynch and Liv Morgan. This is not all Liv Morgan's fault because most of the action that occurs in the ring today is not to the level that it was 30 years ago, but it's never going to be again. They do a lot of training in the ring at the Performance Center now. But you and I know, Dan, in the time that we were watching wrestling, they would have 330 matches a year. You could wrestle 5 years now before you get that many matches. Did you want to add something in there, Dan?
You know, it used to be, like you said, they'd wrestle 330 matches a year. And, they didn't call it 350 days for nothing. Because you was in, you was in your car, and you was going from state to state, city to city, arena to arena, and when you got there, I'm sure it was the same thing. Go in, go to catering, get something to eat, get dressed, get, warmed up for your performance that night. So, I could see where that would get monotonous, and taking it down to 60 matches a year is very, I think is a great thing.
Yeah, it's a great thing for their bodies and for their ability to rest. It's a terrible thing for the quality of match that you see in the ring because they just don't get enough time in front of people to wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
That's my biggest issue with it.
Well, that's also true too. So,
but I agree with you as far as their bodies. If they didn't do all these stupid high risk, high spots, they'd last longer.
Yeah. I mean, we was talking the other day about, AEW, here's a major company, and they don't have anybody to take 2 minutes out of their schedule of doing things to make sure that those ladders are fixed.
Yeah.
I
don't know how Buddy Matthews and Andrade didn't kill themselves.
Exactly. Because that steel doesn't give.
So I'm going to give you my thoughts on the first match, and then I'll lay out and let you give your thoughts as well. This is the portion of the program where Trey's probably going to take a nap. But
I honestly don't know what's going on.
Well, Liv Morgan's about as big as a minute. A great look, and she really tries hard with this character she's performing. She does a good job. She's just greener than grass in the ring because she doesn't have the time in the ring that a lot of the other wrestlers do. And she's not going to get it in front of people because of the way they have everything set up with the schedule now. I think she would be great as part of a group. If they bring back this Wyatt family version under Uncle Howdy, played by Bo Dallas, I think she would be fantastic in it. But as a wrestler holding the world title, it's absolutely preposterous. even with Dirty Dominic Mysterio throwing his chair in the ring and Liv using that chair to beat Becky, it's ridiculous. You saw it coming a mile away, and I'm like, they cannot be going to put that title on Liv Morgan already. Becky just won it, and sure enough, they did. And yeah, I know they think, oh, we're further in storylines, but it is preposterous. So Dan, I will be quiet now and I'll let you share your opinion.
Well, I'm right with you there. As we said before the podcast even started, I was upset that they had taken the title away from Becky Lynch, who won it not that long ago, and they put it on a wrestler who is not that credible. I mean, she's had some good wins, but she's also had some good losses too. And as far as this character she's playing, yeah, I think if they bring back this whole Wyatt family thing and they got Bo Dallas as the head of it, is going to be and bringing her in would be a great asset to this storyline if they would just do it. But like you said, her holding the world title is ridiculous because you could have anybody come in now and beat her and it would look credible.
Yeah.
Because she's so tiny. I mean, if you got Nia Jackson there against her, well, Nia would just annihilate her.
How could you have a credible match between the two of them?
You couldn't. You've got a refrigerator on legs, and then you've got a stick.
Yeah.
You know. So that's my take on that gimmick of her getting the world title.
So match 2. I hope I'm pretty sure this was like a 5-match card. So match number 2 was a 3-way between Sami Zayn as the new Intercontinental Champion, Chad Gable in his new heel persona, and Big Bronson Reed. And I kind of like all 3 of the people involved. They cheered Sammy like he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. He's of Syrian descent. And he really embraced it. They said he was a big hit there this past week in Jeddah. And you could tell he really drew a lot of energy from that crowd. The match was okay. If Brad Rangans had personality, he could have been Chad Gable, but he didn't. Gable has a lot of personality. I like what they're doing with him now. I just wish they hadn't, beat him like a drum for several years beforehand, but he's doing really good, and they're playing up this inevitable break between him and Otis. And then Bronson Reed, for a big guy, I think he moves pretty well. The one thing I did not like about the match, other than, you kind of junking things up by putting 3 people in there, is they kept doing these power moves that required obvious cooperation. So, and one was super impressive. I'll tell you that one first because I think it happened first. But they were all grabbing each other like they were going to do a belly-to-back suplex. And Bronson Reed was in the back at first. And then Gable does a switch and switches out. So now Sammy's in the front, Bronson Reed's in the middle, and Gable is in the back. And they start to do that, all 3 of them, to do the belly to back. And Sammy pushes off. But I did not see Bronson Reed push off at all. Yet Gable still took him over, and they did that 3-person belly to back suplex, which was really impressive. But Reed did a couple of moves that where he had both guys. It was obvious cooperation that they're both getting on his back at the same time so he could dump them. I mean, from a power standpoint, it's super impressive. But I do want to remind everybody, that Rich Boogs was a super impressive muscular guy, and doing those cooperative, both guys on the shoulders with the Usos, he blew his knee out doing that. So you want to be careful about how you're doing these things. It looks impressive for somebody to be able to hold all those bodies up, but when they have to get into position and they have to cooperate with each other to do it, it takes a lot out of it. You got any thoughts about that, Dan?
Well, I enjoy Bronson Reed. I always do like to watch a big man be able to move around. And that's why I enjoy watching Otis wrestle too. But with the guys in the match, I like Sami Zayn. I like Bronson Reed. I can't stand Chad Gable. If I could get close enough to him, I'd put an elbow on his head.
But doesn't that mean he's a great heel?
Oh, he's a great heel. But so I mean that makes me just want to, in the way he's treating Otis right now is just infuriating because everybody loves Otis. Yeah,
I do think I understand what you say, because with the Miz, you always say he's a great heel if he makes you want to punch him. Yeah, I want to punch him, and then I never want to see him on my TV again.
Yeah, that's how I am with Chad Gable. Give him an elbow to the head and then see you, sucker. Sayonara. So, but that's how I felt about. I didn't see any particular clips from that match except Otis giving Chad Gable the big clothesline that Bronson Reed held up, and Bronson Reed moved, and Otis just about killed Chad Gable with that clothesline.
I'm sure he didn't hurt him, but man, that looks stiff.
Didn't it? And it'd be interesting to see how that happens. So what
did we used to call that in football? That would have been a decleater.
But okay, so anyway, moving on to number 3.
Well, you'll love this one. This was Lyra Valkyria versus Nia Jax. And I guess with The Rock now on the board of directors, we're going to get his cousin in every single pay-per-view in a prominent position. Forgive me, folks. I know I keep saying pay-per-view. I know it's a premium live event for most people. Old habits die hard. I remember when pay-per-view just became a thing in the 80s. She's going to be on every premium live event. With all the bad things I have said about her in the past, she actually did a very good job of making Lyra Valkyria look good before she beat her. Of course, she beat her, and she got the Queen of the Ring and hugged Paul Levesque and, all that good stuff. But she did make Lyra Valkyria look really good. She got a lot of offense in. It was a typical little, say, little gal versus big gal match instead of the little man, big man match. This was a little gal, big gal. But I'll tell you, they did a great job. This was probably my 3rd favorite match out of 5. So I know you're probably thinking, well, that's pretty mediocre. Well, the first match was terrible. The 3-way was a 3-way. But if this had been on a 9-match card, depending on who the people were involved, this would have probably still been my 3rd favorite match. I will say it is my absolute favorite Nia Jax match of all time. And with that, I will let you take it from there.
Well, we both have various names for Nia Jax, and and I believe Jim Cornette also called her a sofa.
Yeah, like trying to move a sofa.
I would have liked to have seen the little girl have more of an offense. But, I guess right now they're showcasing, The Rock's cousin.
But she did have a lot of offense. Nia Jax made her look fantastic.
But like I said, I guess we're going to see a lot of Nia Jax due to The Rock being The Rock and being on the board of directors. Now, with that, my problem with Nia Jax is she hurts people.
Yeah, well, it's hard to control that weight.
I think at one time they said that every female wrestler in the locker room has complained about her hurting them. But what the clip that I did see of her, she did pull off some fantastic moves for a woman outside. Like I said, I didn't get to see the match all the way, but I would probably give that one a 4 out of 5 because I probably would have liked the 3-way better. But that's just me.
All righty. Well, that's what makes a world. So, and I will say when she did that drop on her at the end, I was like, ooh, but she did look like it didn't hurt her. So, but I was like, whoa, it's hard to control that much weight coming down. So now to what I think was the match of the night. I liked it a little bit better than I did the Cody versus Logan Paul match, which was also exceptional. But I'll tell you why I liked it just a little bit better. And that was Gunther versus Randy Orton. And Randy, again, shows why he's one of the greatest that's ever been in the ring. And Gunther showed why he's the new up-and-comer and probably going to be a world champion sooner rather than later. This was a hard-hitting, back and forth, no real high spots. There was like one jump off the top rope with a splash. But Gunther is pretty much a stay on your feet, big brawler type. I can't take credit for this. I heard it. I can't remember if Brian Last said it or Jim Cornette, but that Gunther is the new Gene Kiniski. And when you see the young Gene Kiniski, that's pretty accurate. Big, athletic, not necessarily super muscular, but just a big, raw bone, tough guy. I thought the match went just the right amount of time. That's one of the reasons I think I like it a little bit better than Cody and Logan Paul. I don't have anything negative to say about it. What did you think of the match, Dan?
Well, from the video clips that I've seen, like I said, I thought that Gunther was going to kill Randy when he did that splash off the top rope. I mean, he got so much air under that, and it was just like, oh my God. And there was action inside the ring, there was action outside the ring. And like you said, I think it was perfect time. And and you put the king of the ring on the right person. Although I think Randy would have been a fine king of the ring 10 years ago, and I think that his injuries that he suffered with his legs and back are catching up with him again. And I'd hate to see him win the King of the Ring and then go out. It looked like it was a spectacular match, and I wish I could see the whole thing in context.
Well, we'll have to take care of that when you get back home because I think you'd love that match. I agree with you on your assessment of Randy. I think he's at a point in his career where he should be building guys, not losing to everybody. He shouldn't be just jobbed out to everybody. He should be beating a lot of people still too, but the top new younger guys, he should be putting over. I thought he would lose this match to Gunther, and he did. A little bit of controversy, which would keep the story going a little bit longer, because if Gunther is not going to wrestle for the world title until SummerSlam, you're talking about you still got 2 months of programming with him to do something. So some kind of match with Randy again would be something I think everybody would enjoy seeing. The main event, let me say first of all, I was completely wrong about Cody Rhodes. I never saw him as the person to beat Roman Reigns, but he is the biggest babyface in professional wrestling, and he is the best babyface we have had in professional wrestling. I don't know, 15, 20 years maybe even longer. I mean, maybe Brett might have been better, but he is an incredible babyface. He truly seems to enjoy interacting with the people. He is a great representative for the company. And, you know, he's one that Tony Khan let get away, and look at him now. He's the top star, and not only the biggest company, but he's the top star in the business, and very well deserved. I have not seen a bad Cody match since he's come back. And this was not a bad Cody match either. This was a very good match. Logan Paul is far better than he should be with the limited amount of experience that he has. And I know he has an amateur wrestling background, but I think the one thing he still struggles a little bit with, and you saw it in the very beginning of this match and then it went away, is Logan Paul is much better at the high spots than he is at the ground wrestling. They did a chain wrestling exchange on the mat in the beginning, and he missed something. Now, he and Cody were able to cover it up pretty well. I don't know how many people would have picked up on it, but they had a little bit of a thing where they got fumbled up because I think they were expecting somebody to go one way and they went the other. But they got it back pretty quickly. But I think that's the one area he still struggles with a little bit. And it's just because of lack of experience. But you cannot criticize somebody that is this good this soon. He could be the top heel in the company if he decided to do it full time instead of part time. And I know he's got tons of other business interests, but he is just a top notch, smarmy, smart aleck heel. And the only criticism I have of the match is I think that it just went just a little bit too long. I think Cody should have beat him a little quicker with Logan's, obviously he ain't been in the business very long, and he's already wrestled both Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes when they were world champion. So that right there, if that doesn't make him rookie of whatever year he's in, I don't know what does. But I thought the match just maybe went about 5 minutes too long. That's the only criticism I can possibly have of it. So, Dan, your thoughts about Cody, Logan Paul, or anything else about this show?
Well, talking about Cody Rhodes, I don't remember seeing a babyface like him except back in Tour Territory days when the baby faces would go out in the audience and hug the contestants and kiss babies and everything like that. It makes me feel good to see that there's a wrestler out there that's willing to do that again, and that's Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes as a wrestler, like you said, Tony Khan gave up on Cody, and now he's the world champion for your major competitor. And Logan Paul, yeah, the guy has come so far in so little time. I wish he would go full time and defend that belt full time instead of just at the premium live events. Because, back in the day, Ken, when we go to the matches, every match was a titles match. Now, we know it wasn't going to change a house show, but it was still cool to see, So I would like to think that Logan Paul would come back and start defending his title on Raw or SmackDown or whichever one he's on, and start doing this full time and see just how good he can get. That's what I've got to say.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think he's a great talent, and I really enjoy watching him. I can't believe how good he is already.
That's what I said. He's just come so far in so little time. It's great. He's one of those heels. Once again, he's like the Miz. You want to punch him and never see him again on your TV.
Whereas Logan Paul, I want to hit him, but I'm afraid he'll hit me back, and I want to see him again.
Oh, okay. He might come at you with that Superman punch.
I'll tell you what, the guy is a pretty good boxer. I really wouldn't want to throw hands with him.
But I don't think he even boxes anymore, does he?
I haven't seen him box in a while.
His brother, isn't his brother a boxer too?
Yes.
And I think they're both media stars.
They are. They're bigger media stars than they are boxers.
But not for good things. One of them became infamous because he decided to film a corpse in the suicide forest when he visited Japan. He got a lot of hate for that one. And that's kind of where his spiral and like kind of.
I forgot he had done that. Did you hear anything about that, Ken?
No, but you guys got the advantage of me when it comes to pop culture. I know very little.
I didn't even know who he was until somebody had like posted about it because I'm like, this is like horribly messed up. Like zero respect for the dead, and I have zero respect for that dude at all.
You know, I forget what your brother was telling me the other day, and he said this name like I should know it, should be on the tip of my tongue. I was like, who the heck is that?
I feel like that was it one of the Jonas Brothers or whatever?
Could have been. I mean, I don't know.
Or Zac Efron. It was one of the two.
Yeah, I didn't know who Zac Efron was. I think he plays in Iron Claw, and I didn't have a clue who he was. And Caleb's like, oh, no, you've seen him before. And I think somebody did finally say something that I had seen him.
Yeah, he was in that damn High School Musical.
So what do you think the chances are that I ever saw High School Musical?
Absolutely nothing, but I would have figured you'd see like posters or like magazines the kid had been carrying around all the time. And I thought she had a poster.
Do you think I paid any attention to that stuff?
Clearly not.
You'll learn that about your dad. He rarely pays attention to anything.
Yeah, I know.
Well, no, if it's important to me, I pay attention.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I noticed.
You guys know what?
Learn how to play Yu-Gi-Oh with me, right?
So do you guys know what equipoise is?
What the hell is what?
Equipoise.
I'm getting a lot of like Dan.
Oh. What tell us what it is.
Uh-oh.
What happened?
Yeah, you just kicked him from the call.
Okay, hold on. We got to get him back. I was trying to hit mute. Oh, here he comes.
Sorry about that.
My bad. I hit the wrong freaking button. He hasn't figured out how to unmute to tell me off yet. So equipoise is when you have two medical procedures and either one of them is considered effective at treating whatever the situation is. So when that happens, you have equipoise between the treatment options.
Okay.
And I probably butchered that. But yeah, I learned that this week, or somewhat learned that. You got to realize I'm with all these brilliant physicians, and I'm like the monkey in the corner.
Just, what is it? Dr. Watson with Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, it's nothing like that. It's like it's like Plato and Aristotle and Corky the Clown.
Goodness gracious. That's
I figured you hadn't figured out how to unmute so you could tell me off. I hit the wrong button.
life happens.
So no,
That's
I pay
about,
attention.
you know.
I pay attention every once in a while, but you know, other things. Solomon will come up and start telling me about his video game, and I'll tell him, you know, that all sounds very interesting, but I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, I'm gonna level with you. Grandma Pat learned how to play freaking Yu-Gi-Oh with me. You could put forth some level of effort and learn his games.
Yeah, would it be like that basketball game you wanted to play with me? So
okay,
man, I couldn't even inbound the ball. He would snatch it. I was trying to inbound the ball. He would snatch it and slam dunk it right in my face. So after he scored 20 points in a row, I'm like, what's the point of me doing this? I can't even get the ball in the court.
Yeah. No, Solomon might pull some stuff on you. Like he can be tricky sometimes. He figured out in Mario Kart, there's a section in Wario Stadium on the 64 where if you get zapped or hit by a shell while you're going over this ramp, it's basically going to launch you over the map to keep going. But if you hit somebody in the middle of it, they just fall down and they have to loop around again. It pretty much makes the game unwinnable from that point, like the race unwinnable. So he will sit there with lightning bolts and wait for you to get close to that ramp so that you just fall and have to lose.
Wow.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I deal with. So honestly, you know,
whip out the chessboard for you and him because he knows how to play that too.
Because you know he'll beat me like a drum in any of those video games.
Yeah, but it's not.
What he does is he lures you in and he says, "Don't attack my man in Canada." And then
you still mad about that?
He attacks your men in Canada and the western half of the U.S.
We're getting really off topic, but I actually found that board game on Tabletop Sim in the workshop.
Axis and Allies is a great game, and when we used to play it, it would take us hours to get through that game.
Yeah.
Sometimes days.
But I double cross him one time and take the United States out from underneath him, and he never forgets about it.
Because throughout the whole game, he's like, "Don't attack my man in Canada. Don't attack my man in Canada." Well, why are you putting all these people in Western Canada? I'm going to help you take out the Japanese. Oh, really? How come I don't see any boats over here waiting to take you over?
That's called strategy.
It's called double crossing your allies.
Well, I did do that.
Just like Jack Curley and Stavanovich.
Well, I never was Jack Curley-ish about it.
You were close.
Maybe more Paul Bowser.
Oh, okay.
I think we've gone a little far afield. Oh, I was going to tell you, Dan, Iron Claw now is on Max.
Yeah.
And Caleb's got Max. So we'll have to have a watch party for that, too.
Oh, okay, cool.
In person or online.
They say it's sadder than all get out. And they didn't even do the whole story because that would have been too sad to put on film.
Right.
Chris Von Erich's not even in it.
I know they said they wasn't even going to mention him because his career was like one match.
Yeah. I mean, it was mainly him feuding with Percy Prinkle. I think his match was against Skandar, and I think he broke his arm in that.
Uh-huh. Can you imagine the only person that'll get to wrestle you is Skandar Akbar?
Well, and he was the one they talked about in the movie. It shows how Fritz told all the boys that were going to be wrestlers. Well, I think David wanted to be a wrestler.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Kerry. And Chris wanted to be a wrestler more than anything on this earth. And it just was never going to work out for him. He was just way too small. And he had real bad asthma, so The medicine he took made his bones really brittle.
I was going to say he had that brittle bone disease.
Yeah. So there was no way he was going to ever be able to do that. So it's a shame, but it is what it is. I do think it's starting to hurt his credibility a little bit because he continues to defend the indefensible. But do you know who has taken him to task 2 or 3 times now publicly on their radio show?
Vince Russo?
Brian Alvarez.
Really?
No, on their radio show. Brian Alvarez has been taking issue with him. And he's been pointing that out. And Dave, of course, is trying to defend it. And they've got into some heated arguments over it. The next episode will be the second week of June, which is June 10th. Topic-wise, I'll probably talk about something from the book project I've been working on, something I've learned on it. Have we ever talked about the Pesek-Stecker series of matches from 1926?
No, but we can do that next week.
Yeah, I don't remember going over that, so that's something we could do as a topic for the next show.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think we've covered as much as we can cover. I've got some editing to do with this one, so.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's all right. I kicked you off the show at one point. I will be really glad when we're back in the studio because I'm not in love with it's what we had to do to put the show together, but I'm not in love with the whole Skype thing.
Well, like I said, sorry about that. That was all my fault. So,
no,
I were not in the studio.
Oh, well, it's not really your fault. There's not much you could do about that either.
Yeah. All righty, guys. Well, this is Dan from Red Heart Mercantile saying we'll see you later.
Later.
Bye, everybody.